So, the Steam phone. Everyone and their mothers heard about it by now. Everyone and their mothers probably read a spec sheet about it by now. I am by no means some technological genius when it comes to these things. I merely take an interest and felt like waffling, probably to procrastinate something I should be doing. But yeah, don't expect structure, don't expect the scripts, I'm just waffling as the title suggests. So, the Steam phone. What caught my interest with it? Well, currently what I'm using now is a Quest 1 with virtual desktop, and it's been really cool. I still remember like my first time in VR, I want to say was at a car show or some racing related event, some big convention or something, I can't remember. But the point is, there was a booth where there was an advert, or they had an area where they basically were willing to play an advert for their car. It was very simple, no motion controls, it was just put on a headset and you are now driving around in a car, basically. Something on wheels. And even though, obviously, I had no control over it, that was my first exposure to VR, and the ability, the realism, of course by today's standards was probably not that good, but you know, for someone who's never experienced anything like it before, it was incredible. I had never seen anything like it, and from that exact moment I remember, like, when the advert itself ended, like, I was just left in, I guess you could say, a waiting room, similar to just a cozy room in VR chat, I guess. And even though literally nothing was happening, nothing else could happen, I didn't actually tell the person that the advert had finished. They couldn't tell because the place is noisy, so it's not like they could know what I was seeing. But I happily just sat in that area, just looking around at like the pillows, at the windows, at the cozy lighting, how I was able to just immediately become immersed in a completely different place. It was surreal, to put it lightly, you know, like, it was, yeah, unreal. Ever since then, I obviously went out of my way to do anything I could to get my hands on a VR headset, because shit was cool, you know, what can I say? And yeah, after that I managed to get a Quest 1, because it was one of the, I don't want to say the first, but one of the first fully standalone headsets that didn't require any like base station setup, didn't require a powerful PC because I didn't have one at the time. It was an all-in-one headset, and I absolutely fell in love with it for the first few years. I I remember the first month or so, like every single day, I was just thinking about what I could do with VR, what I could see, what I could experience. It was a time of excitement and of pure just joy. Yeah, what can I say? But of course, over time, this headset has grown old, and it's now heavy, it's slow, it doesn't work standalone at all anymore, but that's why I've got virtual desktop there. And yeah, no, it's heavy, it's slow, it's bulky, it's cumbersome, the battery, surprisingly, that's one good thing about having low powered hardware. The battery is actually better than what I've heard the Quest 3 has, but still, regardless, I'm not entirely happy with the battery life anymore, degradation and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, over time, this headset started to age, arguably a lot better than, say, the Quest 2 or any of the other headsets, because, you know, I find this like head strap quite comfortable. I mean, this whole thing is still like a stock headset. I haven't modified it at all, and I'm still happy with it. But of course, I was always looking up ever since, you know, building my PC, ever since, you know, getting into VR headsets and all that sort of stuff, into technology. All I could ever think of was just looking up, for the next best thing. What can I aspire to upgrade to? And it was fascinating to just look at all the options that were available. Of course, shortly after the Quest 1 released, Meta acquired Oculus Studios and later came with the Oculus Quest 2, a headset that came out cheaper, was more powerful, and in many ways superior to the Quest 1. And while of course I was tempted, I didn't actually decide to jump ship, mostly because of the fact that I don't like to do single generation jumps. It, to me, seems wasteful, and if I want to upgrade, if I want to like invest more money into this, I want it to be worth it. I want to see a night and day difference, you know? And so I held off from the Quest 2, which later became quite good, considering the fact that the Quest 2 now is known for an abhorrent strap, terrible IPD adjustment, and overall just the ergonomics and all that was absolutely destroyed. Purely, I believe anyway, because Meta took the Quest 1, a prototype headset that had to be comfortable to prove the industry that standalone could work, and basically just made it as cheaply as possible and cut corners where they could, in this case, ergonomics. By doing this, they achieved their goal, I suppose, but also gave VR somewhat of a nifty name, and of course introduced a lot of kids into VR, which was a whole other can of worms. While there were other headsets out there that interested me, and obviously from a technological standpoint I could only dream of having, that was just it. I could only dream of having it. The budgets, the PC, the base stations, a lot of headsets at the time were outside in track, and I didn't really have like a dedicated play space. I mostly just sort of played where I could, so I changed rooms quite often. So light base stations, lighthouses, they were more or less out of the question. And eventually I did get a powerful I got a PC, built it myself, and suddenly the world of PCVR was open to me, and through that I discovered incredible worlds such as this one, which I spent many hours in, because it, well, I just love this sort of aesthetic. To me, this world really captured VR, what it could become, what it could be, what it could show, the level of detail, how intricately made all these worlds that can be. And again, the whole idea, like the escapism of it all, you know, in a world where things could always be going better, there was always VR, and it was, in its purest form, a nice way to take a break from the world. And what better way to do that than in a genre I absolutely adore, sci-fi, space exploration, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, since doing a bit of PCVR with this headset, it really opened my eyes to just how much I value VR as a technology, how much I would absolutely love to just have the best of the best and all that sort of stuff. And so obviously I started saving, and I saved for quite a while. I wasn't sure what exactly I was saving for though. Of course, with so many headsets on offer now, with the world of PCVR open to me, I had a ton of options now. Almost any headset was open to me, and I'd also recently cleared out of them finally for a bit of VR, like for VR space. And so I was now willing, if I had to go with a base station setup. But of course, there's so many different manufacturers like Pimax and all that sort of stuff. There is just so much choice, and I looked at so many different headsets, and all of them had at least one significant drawback. They excelled in what they aimed for. The Pimax was brilliant for resolution. The Vario was brilliant for resolution. I can't remember more off the top of my head, but I know there were tons that looked at different aspects, and all of them were brilliant in what they aimed to achieve. Only I wanted a more rounded headset. I wanted a headset that had, I guess, my checklist, my wish list of items. Those mainly being eye tracking, for foveated rendering or streaming, and obviously I suppose a bit of expression in VR chat. I wanted it to be lightweight because this Quest is, what's the word? I don't know, like 571 grams, give or take, half a kilogram of a brick lumped on my head. I tolerated it because I was excited, but you know, after a while, it's hard not to notice. It cuts your play session down. I wanted something that was easy to implement. Like, you had some people talk about Primax, for example. Their software was always considered to be a big faff. Like, you know, they were, you know, difficult to get going, and once you did, of course, it's brilliant. But you know, until then, it was a pain, and I didn't really want to go through all that. Then there was the Bigscreen Beyond 2. The Bigscreen Beyond 2, or the 2E, I should say, really caught my interest immediately. I mean, initially I'd looked at the Bigscreen Beyond 1, and it looked incredible. Only issue was, at the time, the base station issue, which I now resolved, as well as the need for a custom facial interface, which I do not have an iPhone to do that with. However, the Beyond 2E promised a universal face gasket. It was 107 grams. It had 117 degree diagonal field of view, I want to say. It had everything. To me, it looked like the first no-compromise headset. It even had OLED panels, which, you know, from the Quest 1, that means a lot to me. And so I finally knew what I was saving up for. I knew what I was saving up for was going to be expensive, but obviously the price tag was pretty extreme. I think with all the controllers, the base stations, all that, it was about, I would say 2,100, give or take. And I was already like, I don't know, up to 500-600 in the savings sort of thing. So I did my best to, you know, continue with that trajectory, and I did my best to save up for Beyond 2E. I did my research into the headset. I heard so many glowing reviews for it. Everyone always talking about how, you know, it was a miracle headset. It was no compromises. It was finally a headset that checked all the tick boxes. Of course, then a few months ago, Steam just out of nowhere just drops the Steam frame announcement, the Steam hardware announcement, and of course, because I'd done my research and all that, I had heard the name Deckard thrown around so much for the past 5 years or so, you know, the same duration I've had my headset for. I don't know if that's like, I don't know. So it's a long time, point is. And to just suddenly see that just drop out of nowhere, it was... it landed so much harder than I thought it would. And looking at it it also checked all the boxes. It had a wide field of view. It had eye tracking. Eye tracking was the most important part to me. For some reason, only like really high-end headsets had it. And like headsets like the Quest Pro, which had discontinued and also had a bunch of issues apparently. The headset was thought to be lightweight with a battery on the back, which is a design I had always loved. It was wireless, which was an interesting choice, I thought, to begin with, because at the time I didn't have any experience with keyboard headsets or tethered headsets, but I told myself that, you know, I want the best. I'm willing to have a cable for it. But, you know, after some people mention how heavy their cables are, how cumbersome, and how they get in the way, they break immersion by reminding you of the headset you're wearing and all that sort of stuff. Suddenly, I was a bit more hesitant about it. But I personally would still be willing to try a tethered headset. Only the frame then offered something very unique in terms of the 5 GHz dongle that said it would offer wide performance wirelessly, which I mean, of course, that's yet to be seen, but from what people have said, and with the addition of foveated streaming, which is, even better, it's foveated rendering and streaming, it goes together, performance gains would be brilliant, especially for my rather modest PC down there. That really intrigued me, and, it checked all their boxes, and suddenly I wasn't too sure on spending $2,000 on a Bigscreen Beyond setup. And so I started to, look more into these subreddits, into these places where I could learn about this magical new device that I had just written off as never coming because I've heard about it for 5 years. It's next month, promise. No, not this month, next month. Honestly, I promise. For a long time, I just thought the Steam frame was never going to come. As time went on and I did a bit more research, it started to come out that all those reviews that were going on non-stop about the Bigscreen Beyond 2E, while not inherently deceptive, tended to miss out a few interesting points, namely the glare that people report in the headset and things like the overheating, the persistence of the OLED panels. And it started to make me a bit more hesitant if, blowing $2,000 on a headset that some people are having trouble with, some people are even, reportedly returning. It started to question if I really want to make such an investment on a headset that might not even fit my needs. And so when I saw the Valve, not the Vindex, the frame, they said it was going to be cheaper than the Valve Index, and that was a much more comfortable budget for me. Less than half the price, at a quarter of the price. Even in the worst case scenario sort of thing, like of being £1,000, it'd still be half the price that I was willing to pay. And so to me, it seems like a fair upgrade. Like, yes, it has LCD panels, but I can't really complain about the immersion of deep blacks when I've got a resolution this Quest 1 of terrible. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but screen door effects, I can count the pixels on this thing sort of thing, I'm in no position to be, complaining about the fact it's not an OLED panel, because I know for a fact OLED panels are expensive, and while it's something I'm willing to pay for, it's also something I feel like I shouldn't worry as much about as I did, With all that in mind, the Steam frame suddenly became much more appealing to me with, its relatively well-rounded specs and their modest price. To me, it just seemed like a Quest 3, but better, And without meta as well, which is a selling point in of itself, I'd say. With this great debate in my head between the Bigscreen Beyond 2 as an upgrade or the Steam frame as an upgrade, I did the only reasonable thing, of course, and I asked the question on Reddit. I can't remember if it is a virtual reality subreddit or the Steam frame subreddit. Obviously one would have a bias, but and it was then it was brought to my attention that supporting hardware for the Bigscreen Beyond, the Index Knuckles and the base stations, they were being discontinued alongside the old Valve Index. And that suddenly caught my attention because, while of course that doesn't mean it's the end of that hardware, the third parties will continue to make them, I'm sure, but that sort of, how do I say, finite lifespan that the headset has, the Bigscreen Beyond, it's concerned me a bit. With how long I've had this Quest 1 that I've managed to keep running for so long now, I was determined to have my second headset have a long as, if not longer, runtime. Because I value, keeping your hardware as long as you can, really. Keep it alive. Once I'm done with this one, I'll see if I can hand this down to someone. But I was, suddenly a bit cautious, even more so about the Bigscreen Beyond 2E. And, looking at the price difference, the amount of time we have to spend in VR now, the overall experience, because people talk about issues with the software. It's one of those things where I I sort of tricked myself into believing I was some sort of enthusiast, that I needed the best, that I wanted the best, that if I saved up enough, I will get the best and I will use it to the best of its abilities. But as time went on, I don't know, the truth sort of settled in a bit more, and I realised I was more mid-range at best, maybe even low end, in my stingy ass. But it was interesting to think about. With this great revelation, I quickly came to the conclusion that spending £2,000 on a headset that I might not use very often due to time constraints or a lack of software, because another big issue with the VR industry is just the software. There's not an overwhelming amount of games and stuff to play, which is a shame. But with all that in mind, I sort of realised that £2,000 on a headset it's not really a reasonable solution for my needs, And the Steam frame just seems to deal with all my needs perfectly. I mean, again, I mentioned before briefly, I think, to me, eye tracking for foveated rendering and streaming, that was my number one goal. And now that eye tracking is available on a cheap headset with wide resolution, better resolution, wider field of view, lightweight and balanced design, and even wireless with apparently wide quality, it just seems like a headset that would just be perfect for me in my use cases. And of course I can share with friends that come over as well, which is something I wouldn't be able to do as easily with a Bigscreen Beyond 2E. Of course I could with the universal light block, but the IPD adjustment would be a bit of a pain. And so yeah, in the end, I think I'm going to be set on buying a Steam frame if that releases. A lot of people talk about the price concerns, because recently they delayed the release of it due to the ongoing RAM prices. Thanks AI. But of course, to me, I'd already been saving for Bigscreen Beyond 2E, so I will probably buy it whatever price it comes out, and I'll be happy. It'll be a massive upgrade from this brick of a headset I call the Quest 1. So yeah, I think that's more or less everything I have to say.